Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. Gareth Cliff has sparked a major online debate. He posted this on Twitter. Here's what he said. One of my best friends, who is not at all stupid and whom I respect, says he'd rather have Zuma back than this GNU or Cyril's ANC. For context, he's a white guy with a successful business and kids. I suspect he's not the only one who thinks this way. That tweet went viral and people jumped in on both sides. Some people disagreed with him. This user said, I'd argue that the Zuma South Africa government got us on the grey list by handing billions to the Guptas, which contributes to a cautious investment approach towards South Africa. And with Zuma back in power, I think it would become more difficult to get off the grey list. Well, firstly, Zuma can't get back into power, but I guess he's talking about the MK getting back into power. And just to comment, there's a recent report which has come out from Open Secrets, which has showed how corrupt African leaders have been laundering money by buying property in South Africa, and how law firms, real estate agencies, and banks have been helping them. This is part of the reason why South Africa has been grey listed, along with some people selling buffaloes and Ankole cattle in US dollars on their private farms. This stuff has contributed to the grey listing. But clearly the disagreement comes from the narrative around, the Guptas and how Zuma was involved with that. Others have agreed with Gareth Cliff. So we've got one user posting here that since the GNU has been in place, there have been regular propaganda pieces pushing for a global ID and a central bank digital currency for South Africa. Total sellouts. The GNU recently signed the United Nations Pact for the Future, which is basically a commitment to a one world government under UN control. Now, this is going into the conspiracy theory side of things a little bit, but that's a view. Another user posted this. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I see your friend's point. Ramaphosa has proven to be a deceitful traitor, betraying this nation and selling it to the highest globalist bidders for a handful of silver, which he seems to be stashing away in his couch. That's scathing. Another person said, the GNU story is nonsense. It's a grand coalition between the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa and the Democratic Alliance. President Zuma remains by far the best president we've ever had in South Africa. Another user said the following, at times, all you have to do is to block out the noise from the mainstream media and do your own research. You'll be surprised that whilst the 9 wasted years had its own challenges, the country actually functioned. Look at Eskom as an example. The user then posted this graphic showing the financial losses at Eskom in different years. Fundamentally, the graphic shows that between 2009 and 2017, Eskom was in the green and making profits. And between 2017 and 2020, Eskom actually lost 45 billion rands. So that's a significant statistical and empirical measure of performance, right? Where do you stand, however, on this question of Jacob Zuma and whether or not his administration was better? What we know from Stats South Africa is that unemployment has been higher under the President Cyril Ramaphosa administration. We know also that the cost of living has been higher. We know that the rand has been weaker. Outside of the last 240 days, there has been more load shedding under President Ramaphosa than under Jacob Zuma. The question in and of itself is interesting because it makes one think about the Jacob Zuma effect for the 2029 elections. Not now, for the 2029 elections, because the 2024 elections shifted the dynamics in South Africa significantly. Prior to that election, in the previous election, ANC was on 57%. In the 2014 elections, ANC was on 62%. So they went from 62, which was a Zuma number, to 57, which was a Ramaphosa number, to 40. And then we saw MK coming out of nowhere to get 14% of the electorate, EFF sitting on 9, DA sitting on 22. So the dynamics shifted in such a way that we had to have this coalition. So now a lot of people are beginning to think about what's next, what happens in the next 5 years. And we saw in 2019 that the DA was already starting to plan for 2024 and already planning to make a coalition with the ANC. And that plan is a plan that they were talking about late in 2019, around about November, December. And there's a video of Helen Zille actually talking about that particular thing. So it's a question that is relevant, although it's a long-term question. What will the Zuma effect be in 2029? Here's why it's a relevant question. If people feel that the economy was better under Zuma, that they had more money in their pockets, that they were somewhat safer, and that also that, jobs were more accessible, those people may give MK more support in the next election. Think about this. People had a similar perspective under the Trump administration, and this helped him in this election. People voted in part for Trump in America because they viewed his administration as being better on the economy and better in terms of international conflict, less wars under Trump. People would remember that they got stimulus checks during the pandemic, which were signed by Donald Trump. They were approved by Congress, which had a Democratic majority, but the name on the check was Trump. So when Americans were reflecting, they reflected and said, we did better under Donald Trump economically, and the Bidenomics economic period is worse for us. And a lot of them were happy to go back and give Donald Trump that vote. Of course, there were other issues such as culture wars. And in South Africa, there are social issues. There are issues of race, language policy that we've seen AfriForum fighting with Panyaza Lesufi. We've seen also the issues of immigration, which have been able to captivate a lot of social attention, a lot of media attention as well, in the same way that you had immigration and culture issues in America. But fundamentally, a lot of analysis is indicating that the reason why Donald Trump came back to the White House, or is going back to the White House, is because of the way people feel about the economy. There are some right now who think that Jacob Zuma has no prospects of being the most powerful or most influential political player in South Africa because of the upcoming arms deal case, which is, I think, in April next year, his age, and the fact that he can't go to parliament himself because of the judgment of the Constitutional Court. However, the question is that any different from how people felt about Donald Trump in 2022, 2023, when there were 4 court cases against him, when, there was the whole Donald Trump is a felon and he has 34 indictments or whatever the case may be in terms of the number of the counts that were found against him in the New York court. People knew all of that, and they still voted for the Republicans and Donald Trump. People voted for Trump because over time, their view of the Trump administration mellowed, and it led to Trump winning resoundingly in 2024. Now, the question then becomes, is that something that can potentially happen in South Africa in 2029? If people feel sour about the Ramaphosa administration, if they feel like it was worse for their pockets, their lives, their economy, are they going to be favorable to the MK party in 2029? What do you think? I think it's relevant, and I think even the fact that Gareth Cliff, who is somebody who was writing letters to Jacob Zuma, very critical of Jacob Zuma, and is now saying, hey, maybe this guy wasn't so bad. And he's using, obviously, the tool of talking through his friend. Gareth doesn't want to say, maybe I also agree with this guy. He wants to say, no, my friend, not about my friend, but his friend, his buddy. Like sometimes when people want to write to those radio shows and talk about a relationship situation that is embarrassing. Maybe they want to say, my neighbor took my wife or something like that. They'll say, I have a friend whose neighbor took his wife. I'm not saying that's what happened here. I'm just saying that you never know. You never know. What do you think, though? Do you think that Zuma was running a better economy and country than President Ramaphosa? Where do you stand on this issue? Let's have a conversation in the comments. I'm curious to hear what you think. Right. Let's move on to the second topic, and it also relates a little bit to Eskom. And the topic is, was Andre de Ruyter lying about corruption at Eskom? The new chairperson of Eskom has said there's no evidence of mafias at Eskom. That's what he said. Now the question is that true? Well, if you don't remember or you want a quick recap, Andre de Ruyter was the CEO of Eskom. He resigned summarily and fled South Africa, saying that he was fearing for his safety. He released a book while in exile, quote unquote, and that book is Truth to Power, My 3 Years at Eskom. Before he fled South Africa fearing for his life, according to him, he did a series of media interviews. And in those media interviews, he made a variety of claims. He claimed that there was an attempted poisoning with cyanide. Someone put cyanide in his coffee cup, he said. He made allegations of ministers being involved in corruption or knowing about corruption. He claimed there was corruption at the Tutuga power station. He claimed there was a fuel oil syndicate that was costing the Tutuga power station 100 million rands a month and 1.2 billion a year. He claimed Eskom itself was losing 1 billion a month from the activities of these cartels and syndicates. And he claimed there was embedded criminality in Eskom. That book is one of the best-selling books in South Africa. People bought it. It was all over the shelves in exclusive books and all over the place. Here are some of the things that de Ruyter said to ENCA. This is what he said.
We know of at least 4 organized crime cartels operating in Mpumalanga in Eskom. Some of them also have interests in Transnet, and we see that in our inability to rail coal to Majuba Power Station, for example, where we don't have enough electric locomotives because the overhead lines are stolen, and Transnet doesn't have enough diesel locomotives because these are being tampered with and otherwise disabled. So these 4 cartels are quite sophisticated as far as we can tell. They are well organized. It's interesting that they've adopted the language of the mafia, so people are called soldiers, and they have a hit squad, allegedly between 60 and 70 highly trained, well-armed people, and people get assassinated in Mpumalanga. I think the media maybe has become very used to these reports, so it doesn't receive much airtime anymore, but every week there's pretty much an assassination. So it's deeply entrenched, and it is highly organized.
Have you approached the president or any of the ministers about your concerns regarding high levels of irregularities, theft, corruption, sinister goings on at Eskom?
Absolutely. I shared the information with a minister. I think I shouldn't mention names, but I did share it, and as well as with senior advisors to the president himself. I never informed the president personally, but I certainly gave the message through, which, by the way, I'm obliged by law to do.
Is Eskom a feeding trough, if you like, for the ANC?
I would say the evidence suggests that it is. I expressed my concern to a senior government minister about attempts, in my view, to water down governance around the $8.5 billion that, by and large, through Eskom's intervention, we got at COP26. And the response was essentially, you have to be pragmatic. You have to, in order to pursue the greater good, you have to enable some people to eat a little bit. So yes, it is, I think, entrenched.
Andre, when you did approach a minister, about your concerns about sinister and criminal goings on at Eskom, what was the response like?
So when we pointed out that there was one particular high-level politician that was involved in this, the minister in question looked at a senior official and said, I guess it was inevitable that it would come out anyway, which suggests that this wasn't news.
And is this high-level politician still acting as a politician, as a member of parliament, or?
Indeed.
Is he or she in cabinet?
Yeah, let's not go there.
So Andre de Ruyter made these serious allegations, and he went further. He retained an investigative firm, the George Fivers Forensic and Risk Firm. He said that he was advised by Pravin Gordhan to get intelligence. Now, General Fivers was the inaugural National Commissioner of the newly established South African Police Service. He was appointed in 1995 and served for 5 years. His primary responsibility was to consolidate the 11 separate policing agencies into a unified force. This George Fivers firm was paid 50 million rands to do these investigations by Business Leadership South Africa. They feature a lot. They're the same people who've pledged 250 million to the President's Project Management Office. I did an episode on that. The Deputy President is the CEO of Discovery, Adrian Gore. And, you know, a lot of the big businesses and the CEOs who've pledged support to the President are in this structure. So Business Leadership South Africa paid this firm to do investigations for Andre de Ruyter to expose the mafias who were operating in Eskom. Now, the problem was the firm produced a dodgy dossier. First, they were using apartheid-era assassins and operatives who did the investigation. And this was exposed by News 2024. According to News 2024, when they looked at the dossier, they said the Fivers reports and diagrams are stuffed with wild, wild thoughts. Wild, wild thoughts. No, that's not what they said. They said the Fivers reports and diagrams are stuffed with wild and uncorroborated allegations. No evidence is provided for many of the claims, including that senior members of the executive were involved in criminal syndicates and even a poisoning plot against de Ruyter. So de Ruyter was, and the report that he compiled, the dossier that he compiled, discredited in that respect. I think Carte Blanche also looked at the same dossier and they said, this is bogus, this is dodgy. You know, Pravin Gordhan, just in passing, as somebody who seems to have had a record of advising people to do investigations or doing investigations on the side himself. It's a story for another day. But if de Ruyter was telling the truth that he got the advice from Pravin Gordhan, then something interesting around that in and of itself. Now, de Ruyter has been criticized as having been a bad CEO. You know, when he was appointed at Nampak, which is this company that does a lot of packaging, you know, tin food, aerosol cans, a lot of canned items around Africa. They're operating in Angola, South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Nigeria, and they have a large operation. When he became the CEO of Nampak in 2014, the share price was 37 rands a share and the market cap was 29 billion. When he left 5 years later, the share price was 7 rand a share and the market cap was 5 billion. So there were many people who were critical of his competences, skills to be actually able to run a large operation such as Eskom. So, you know, when he was failing, many of those people, and I was one of them who came and said, this guy is not good. But you remember at the time, the media was saying, this guy is wonderful. This guy is Rice Krispies. This guy is cornflakes. This guy, he is the most delicious chocolate you can ever get from Nestle. That's what they were saying at the time. They were saying he's a latte coffee, you know, from that Nespresso machine. That's how good they were saying he was. But Eskom was a disaster under him. So he fled. Now, the Eskom board's chairperson, Teto Nyati, has come forward and said that investigations that they've done have revealed that there was no evidence of corrupt mafias operating at Eskom. Nyati is the former CEO of Altron and MTN South Africa. He was appointed following the resignation of the former chairperson, Mpho Makwana, when he had conflict with the late Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan. So recently, as you know, Eskom has hit a milestone, 5-year milestone, with load shedding being suspended for 240 days in succession. So for the last 240 days, most of 2024, there's been no load shedding. So when Nyati made these statements, he was responding to a question that was asked at the Center for Development and Enterprise think tank webinar, which happened this week. And he said that, look, we can't find any evidence that there are mafia-style networks and cartels that had infiltrated Eskom. During the webinar, he said ongoing efforts had gathered a significant amount of data, but the information gathered did not point to mafia activity. No mafia here, no mafioso. What? There's no Italian here doing Italian things. This is what he said. Some quotes from his answer. As a board, we have not seen evidence of mafias in Eskom. This is one of our 9 priority areas or systemic issues at Eskom. We have established offices to drive consequent management and work with external organizations like the SIU, Special Investigating Unit, and the South African Police Service, SAPS. We have gathered so much information, but there is no evidence to say they are mafias. There is evidence of corrupt individuals within Eskom. We have moved away from generalizing to say that our employees are corrupt and do not work hard. So that's what has been said by the current chairperson of Eskom. Who do you believe? Who do you think is telling the truth about corruption at Eskom? I saw some people on social media saying, but what about the presidential cartel, etc., etc. What do you think? What do you think about the situation? Do you think that Andre de Ruyter was telling the truth? Or do you think that the chairperson of Eskom now is telling the truth? Or do you think that there's a cover-up of the corrupt activities that are going on at Eskom? Because Eskom is still costing a lot of money through these payments that they have to make. I can't remember what they're called. There's a name for these payments that are being made by Treasury that are unbudgeted expenses, basically, and they have to keep making them over and over again. So Eskom is still costing South Africa billions. But they're saying that there's no evidence of corrupt individuals, of mafias or cartels or syndicate. De Ruyter said there's syndicates. Who do you believe? Let's have a conversation. What do you think is going on? But obviously there's no more load shedding as things stand right now. So that's a positive in the leadership column for the current Eskom administration. But who do you believe? Let's have a conversation. Till the next one.